Welcome to the very first Etsy drop related video of 2023. Hello, welcome back to another video. Today's video, we are kicking off the Etsy themed drops, Etsy related craft videos, whatever you want to call them. It's a work in progress. For this first launch, we are making some stuffed animals, and specifically, we are doing some ducks. Some of them are normal ducks. Some of them are a little more themed, with Avatar: The Last Airbender being turtle ducks. If you are not familiar with Avatar: The Last Airbender, it is a cartoon that aired on Nickelodeon many years ago. There is a very large fan base surrounding it, and in that world, there are creatures called turtle ducks that are a mix between a duck and a turtle, hence turtle duck. They're very cute, and I found a pattern for ducks and turtle ducks, and I have been wanting for a very long time to make them, so that is why we are kicking off this new year with those specific animals. In case you did not see my 2023 plans video that I made at the very beginning of the year, basically my goal is to have the very last Sunday of every month be a dedicated video making some sort of cool upcycled stuffed animal, some sort of quilt that is just really fun, really creative, typically themed around something specific, and that item is then going to go live for sale in my Etsy shop the first Monday of the following month. So today is the last Sunday of this month. February 6th is going to be the first Monday of the month, and that is when all of these ducks and turtle ducks that I make in this video are going to be going live, and that will be at 9 a.m. So if there are any of these ducks or turtle ducks that you see me make in today's video that you really like and you want to go grab one of them for yourself, make sure to head over to my Etsy shop. The link will be in the description box down below, so you can go and favorite the shop so you will get notified when I launch these items. Now it is time to jump into actually making these turtle ducks, and I already have a handful of things that I have done in preparation, so let me bring you in and I can show you what those are. Okay, don't mind the insane mess that is in the background there, but here are the two prototypes that I made for this pattern. We have the normal duck and we have the turtle duck. And keep in mind, this is a prototype, so like you can see the stitching really obviously. It's just like polka dot fabric. You can see the thread and stuff through there, and things are awkward. So I do this with all of the plushes that I make. These are purely just scrap fabric. This is permanent vinyl, so like this would just come right off if I peeled it off. And this is all just to test the pattern, make sure it is looking the way that I want it to look, so I can make notes of things I need to adjust, like these pellet pouches that are in here. This one is too far forward, so this guy falls forward. This one is in a much better place, so he doesn't really fall as much, but he still might fall a little bit. So I have made notes of what I want to do to perfect these, and I have cut out everything that I need to make two of each. And we have those four patterns over here. So I have already traced the pattern out for all four of them and cut everything out. Some of this fabric needed interfacing because it was either really thin or really stretchy. And so I've interfaced all of them already, and they are all ready to go. And essentially I am just to the stage that I am ready to start sewing. So what I will probably end up doing is bringing you along for probably one of each, maybe, and then I'll just do the other two off camera and then show you what they all look like finished. So fun fact, I actually made those prototypes and cut out the fabric for all four of these stuffed animals probably close to a year ago. I made them with every intention of making them and like being gung-ho and getting them in like getting this turned around in like 2 weeks, and it didn't happen, obviously. So I thought I was fully ready to just start sewing them until I realized I actually had not cut out the applique pieces. So we still need to do that, but that's okay, because basically the way I do the applique on all of my stuffed animals, if I had an embroidery machine, I would use embroidery files and have the eyes and any other detail embroidered on, but I do not own an embroidery machine, nor do I really foresee myself investing in an embroidery machine really anytime in the near future. But what I do have is a Cricut, and what I do have is a heat press. So what I have done is, also, by the way, all of the patterns of most of the plushes that I've made on my channel, a lot of them anyway, the pattern that I am following is by, I think it's Choly Knight, I think is how you pronounce that. I don't actually know. She has her own website and her own Etsy page. I will put her links in the description box below, but she makes so many really awesome stuffed animal patterns, and she sells the patterns so that people like me can buy the pattern from her, or in this case, I think this is a free pattern that she just gives out, and she lets you buy the pattern, make items, sell items that you made from the pattern, and all she does is ask for like a shout out, essentially saying like, hey, this is the creator of this pattern, go give it a like, buy the pattern if you like it. So like I said, all of her links will be in the description box below because she does fantastic work. But what I do to get these designs ready for the Cricut is I basically just screenshot them and size them in my Cricut design space. So you can see here, I have my Cricut design space open, and right here, these are the applique pieces I would need for the duck and the turtle duck, and I have it saved, already sized, exactly the size it needs to be. So I'm just gonna copy and paste that 3 more times because that is for 1 turtle duck, or 1 duck, and I need it for 4 of them. So I have all 4 of those, so then I can print that. Then my Cricut can be cutting those up. I can be getting my heat press heated up so that I can weed them, get the eyes put on where they need to go, and then because they are heat pressed, unlike these that I showed you that are just permanent vinyl and like I could peel it off if I wanted to, these are heat pressed on, and it would take a lot of work to peel them off, and they're also going to be a lot more flexible and significantly less likely to just fall off. Oh, that's really crooked. Okay, I have all of the eyes heat pressed on. They are adhered, they're not going anywhere. So now we are able to actually jump into the sewing part, which is the fun part. And I've decided to just go ahead and bring you along with me while I do one of the turtle ducks, because really the turtle ducks are more exciting than the normal duck. So I'm going to bring you along as I do the turtle ducks step by step and everything that I am doing. I went ahead and grabbed 2 different colored threads because I'm going to be using this yellow thread for the majority of the duck, and then for the shell there's a part that you have to top stitch, and I don't want yellow thread top stitched on, so I grabbed this green, but I'm not sure if I want to do green or brown. I think I actually want to do brown, so I might put this green back. Yeah, I think a brown top stitch is gonna work really well, especially with this specific duck that I am doing. So I'm going for more of like a yellow duck feel with yellows and like tan browns. The shell itself is going to be green, and then I have these polka dot orange for the feet. So starting, I need to thread my machine. Something I'm going to be doing with this pattern that is different from any of the other stuffed animals I have done is I'm actually going to be ironing it as I go. I have not been doing that up until this point. My hope with ironing all of the seams that I am making is that they'll actually stay put a little better and that they will look cleaner, and I won't get them sort of bunching as much. The final product will look nicer, and I really think that is going to improve the overall quality, because you can see with these that on the wings and the feet and just in certain areas, like it seems like the fabric kind of wants to bunch and sort of fall back in on itself, and sort of just, it doesn't hold its shape really well, and ironing is going to help sort of seal those into place, that it does actually keep a nice crisp shape to it for a very long time. So I'm going to basically go through and sew as many pieces as I can before I need to iron, and then I will stop, iron, and then we will come back and then we can start sewing pieces together. All right, step number 1 is sewing the darts on the head, like so. And because all of the fabric that I use is secondhand, the whole purpose of me making these stuffed animals is to upcycle secondhand fabric and to not be buying fabric brand new to be using into these plushes, but to use what I already have to make these plushes, which is why I'm using polka dots for the feet instead of just a solid orange, because I didn't have a solid orange. I had polka dots. Or I didn't have enough solid orange. I have solid orange for another duck's feet, but I didn't have enough to do this one as well. So that's why I'm using polka dot orange. With this, a lot of the seams are not gonna be like the perfect seam, because I'm working with what material I have. Some material is a little more stretchy than others. Some I have to interface because it is too stretchy, and I do need to have everything at least be a uniform stretch, because it's not a uniform material. Then when you get to things like these darts, I mean, I've never really been able to make really good darts. So sometimes they have a bit of an extra point there, no matter how much I work at like blending the seam into it. It just kind of always ends up being a bit pointy because of the type of material that I'm using. And like, this is softer, but I couldn't tell you what it is because I got it at a thrift store, I'm pretty sure. Just so you know, so you're not watching this being like, why do all of her seams look like trash, and why is she not using like minky or really like high quality material or something? That's why. I would absolutely use it if I found it secondhand, but usually you don't find that stuff secondhand, so. Progress update. I have all of these pieces sewn together. This is the piece that will be for the middle of the head, and then this is the bill and the 4 feet, and I've just sewn them where they need to be sewn. On the bill, you can see I have cut the seam so that when I turn it right side out, everything will sit nicer, and on the feet, I have cut really up close on all of the seams. I could probably cut even closer, like in these little corners right here, and that's just so that when this turns right side out, everything sits really seamless. And my hope is that a combination of cutting those seams close and ironing is gonna help everything just sit really nice. But popping back in for the progress update, because I think I need to double check there's nothing I need to do on the shell. But then after I double check the shell, I can't progress any further until I start sewing like different pieces together, and I want to iron these pieces before I start sewing them to other things. So let me double check that shell quick, and then we'll get to doing some ironing. Turns out that I did want to go ahead and get this shell sewn. So I did that quick, and now we are to the point where we can turn this right side out. So I have this little stick with me, and basically what that does is it helps you as you're turning sort of get those seams and all the little pieces of fabric pushed all the way out so it sits really nice. So that instead of trying to like shove your fingers into all the little nooks and crannies, you can use that to kind of help push that seam out. And this is going to be really, really useful when we take this over to the iron to sort of flatten it and set it in place. You want to be careful that you don't push so hard on the seam that you rip the seam out, because I have definitely done that in the past. And another fun little tidbit, the fabric that I am using for this shell is actually upcycled from leftover fabric that I had when I was making a Loch Ness Monster for somebody. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the bill and the feet right side out as well, and then we can iron them. And sometimes when you have really small pieces like this, it's good to have a pair of hemostats on hand, and you can take those to reach in and sort of grab the fabric to pull it out. And again, just be careful not to accidentally stab the hemostats through the fabric. Again, I know this from experience. I don't know if you can see that or not, but the before and the after, and just like how clearly flatter and like cleaner this one looks. Okay, now for these darts, because this is like 3D, can't iron it flat because then it will be flat and that's going to look very strange. I want it to have like that shape to it. So I am going to try, and I don't really have a way to film this, so I'm just showing it to you now, but I'm gonna try sort of putting this seam on the edge of my ironing board in hopes of seeing if I were to iron it on the edge there, if that would help keep that shape a little better. We're gonna experiment. I'll let you know how it looks. All right, so here is the before and here is the after. I don't think there is a massive difference, but you can see how this one is a little less noticeable because it doesn't sort of cave in on the actual seam like this one does. And I think that's gonna help the shape overall. Also, I think it's going to help the actual point because that's sort of pushed into place, whereas this might still try like pushing its way out more. I'm not quite sure. I'm gonna do this one and we're just gonna kind of see how it goes. We're going to start by finishing this shell because I have the brown still in my machine and I want to use it and not have to switch back and forth a bunch of times. So the first thing we need to do for this shell is stuff it, because once we get the stuffing in, then we can do all the top sewing. And I have been told, and I have learned, when you are stuffing things, you want to do a very small amount. It may take a bunch of little passes of the very small amount, but this is going to give you the best accuracy, and it's going to make the finished product look the nicest because you're not trying to put a huge wad in one area and then a huge wad in another and then end up with gaps and just have a bad time. So although it takes a lot longer, the finished product looks much better if you just do a little bit of stuffing at a time and just make sure you are getting it in all of those little nooks and crannies. Now that we have this stuffed, we can go ahead and move on to the top stitching. And the nice thing about this is we don't have to worry about sewing the back closed because this is going to be laying on the back of the turtle duck and we're going to be sewing all the way around the entire shell anyway. So we don't have to worry about sewing that closed. We can just leave it as is. But for the top stitching, we need to get a shell pattern. So I cut this out from the original pattern. You can see what the full piece looks like there, and then I just printed it out again to cut this little bit out so I can use it as a template. and I'm going to lay it on there, and I'm gonna try using this air-soluble marker. It'll disappear after like 24 hours at the most with just being exposed to the air, but I don't know, this fabric might be too dark that even if I draw on there, like, you won't be able to see it, but I'm gonna try. I thought the fabric was too dark. Turns out my marker is just dead and I need to get a new one, so plan B. Instead, I'm going to try using this Taylor's chalk that I have and just very carefully try to mark on there. Yeah, I'd say that worked pretty well. All right, now on the pattern, it says to start with the 1/4 of an inch all the way around. I'm actually going to start with this very center piece because I want to make sure that that is in there and good. So we're just gonna go nice and slow. So that is what that looks like, and now I'm gonna go around and do the 1/4 of an inch around the very, very edge. All right, and the last thing to do is just to take all of these corners and do a straight line out from all of them. With that, here is the final little shell all ready to be sewn onto the back of our little turtle duck. All right, it is day 2 and my goal today is to finish this turtle duck plush. Also, I sat down to get working on it and I was looking at this shell that I made and finished yesterday, and I really, really like this fabric for this shell. It's a very good fabric. I'm quite happy with that selection. Just wanted to throw that in there. I'm proud of myself. Let's get to making a turtle duck. We're starting off by getting the head gusset onto this first side of the turtle duck. So I have my pins here ready to go. This is the gusset. And actually, I think I'm gonna try, I got these off of Amazon not that long ago, and they are a bunch of little sewing clasps. So I think I'm gonna try, and it came in this really fun tin. Look at that, fun tin. So I'm gonna try, I think, actually using those all the way around instead of pins, and just see how it works. I might like the pins better, but I'm gonna give this a go. And it should look something like this when it's all pinned or clipped, and we sew all the way around that. And then you just take the other side and you essentially line this up with, well, I might have had that in the right facing the right way, line this up and pin all of that and sew it together. And especially when you're working on like really big curves like this, the more pins, the better, or clips in my case right here. Also, just the slower, the better. Don't rush this. Ask me how I know that. When you're sewing darts or gussets like this, I've learned you need to make sure after you sew the second one together that these seams actually come and like overlap, so that you didn't just sew one and then when the other one there's a big hole because it didn't like connect that second seam. So that's just what I'm looking at right now, is to make sure that both seams, when they came all the way to the edge, that they actually connected at those points. So like right there, you can see that connected those 2 points, and there you can see really easily those 2 crossed over each other. So now we can turn this inside out, and there's a little duck head. There we go. Look at that. That's pretty darn cute. So at this point, you can see the shape pretty well, what it's supposed to look like. You see how there's kind of like these ridges in the seams, sort of all over, and like this opening, there's really not that much stuffing right there. This is actually pretty squishy, pretty empty still. So I'm gonna keep stuffing to try to really like fill out the shape a lot more. And this comes back to just all of the different random materials that I use, because I have to be really careful when I'm stuffing, because depending on what material I'm using, I might not be able to stuff very much into a specific plush because it'll warp the shape too much, because the fabric itself is not like sturdy enough. So like I have to be careful that I'm not putting too much in this nose and then it come like down too far or something, or that I push too much up here and then it warps that. But already even just that little bit of stuffing that I added, like you can see the ridges there are lessened and it isn't nearly as bumpy. It still is over here a little bit, but okay, I am pretty happy with that. So the next thing we need to do is ladder stitch this opening closed. Alright, I am going to do my absolute best to demonstrate this to you, but keep in mind, I am not a teacher, so I have no idea if this is going to make any sense at all. First thing I do, take a needle, I take some thread. I knot off the end right there, just a simple double knot, and you're going to pick one side to start on. So I'm going to just start over here, pop the needle out somewhere at the very, very edge of that seam, and then I pull it through so that the knot is hidden inside of the fabric. And then a ladder stitch, all it is a stitch where you just even amounts, you go in the fabric here, come out, and go straight across. In the fabric, out, straight across. In the fabric, out, straight across. And you do that all the way across, so it ends up looking like a ladder with all of the different like ladder rungs. And then what you're able to do then is, as you pull the thread taut, it pulls all of those rungs together and closes this seam and makes it invisible. So it looks like you machine stitched it. If you did it right, it'll essentially look like this seam here, where it does not look like you did that by hand. So I'm gonna start right there, and again, not a teacher. I am still figuring out how the heck to do this as well. Like, and typically what I do, this is just like my preference, is I'll do 2 passes. I'll do one pass going this way, and then I'll turn around and I'll do one pass going the opposite direction. And each time my ladder stitch will be like decently far apart from each other. Like those aren't super close, but I'll do this so that I am not stressing about getting it perfect on the first pass, because the second pass I can go back over this whole seam and kind of help clean it up some. I'm gonna grab that, and you can pull it taut, which that popped up a little bit, so just push that back in. Yep. And when you pull it, you see how essentially it closed. Not perfect, and of course, like I said, I haven't tied it off at the end, and I plan on going back through and doing a ladder stitch and essentially having the stitches come out in the middle between all of these seams, and that'll help tighten it and make it so like these puckers here are gone. But that's the effect that you want. So it closes it up, you don't see the seam, or the stitch rather, and it just makes it look really clean. So I'm going to do this back up, and I'll keep doing it on camera so you can see it. And you tighten it, and now that's all closed. Not perfect, but again, you know, it's by hand, it's closed. This is also the head that's getting sewn onto the body. You're not gonna see it, so it's good. I'm gonna tie this off, and I'll show you how I do that. I just take it wherever it went out, I bring it right back into the fabric and very quickly out of the fabric again. And I take that loop and I just put my needle through it twice, tie that taut so that you have just a little tiny knot there. And then I take my needle and I basically stab that knot toward the seam, and then I push my needle out here so that I can pull that in. It'll hopefully help hide that knot that I just made, which it kind of did. It doesn't always work, but it kind of did. And then now that you've pulled that out, you can pull that taut and snip that, and it retracts back in. To finish the head, we needed to stuff this bill. And I remember when I made these prototypes that one of the notes I made was not to stuff this bill so full. This is so chunky, it looks like these little ducks got Botox. So we're not gonna overstuff these little bills on these guys. There we go. That is much better. And there's really no stuffing at all, like this entire almost half of an inch right here. And that's okay, because that's going to kind of flatten out and spread a little bit. And also I want to make sure that's kind of all stuffed in there so that when I do a quick little gathering stitch around the edge here, that I'm not getting stuffing pulling out. But that is the duck bill sewn. And again, doesn't have to be perfect because we are now going to attach this to the head, which actually I am not going to cut that. I'm gonna leave that thread there and we're just gonna jump right into the head. So on the turtle ducks, this seam goes horizontally right on the seam that's right there on their face. So I'm going to go ahead and get that, and for that you do a ladder stitch that's more 3D. So again, I'll try to show you that. Like, I am not a great instructor, so I am so sorry if none of this makes sense at all. But essentially you're gonna sew it around so you hide all of these like imperfections and bumps. Like, you're not gonna see any of that by the time you're done, hopefully. What you're wanting to do is the same thing that I showed you here, where you're wanting to go in and out of each of the respective fabrics at the same spot, like all the way around. So like if I came out of this fabric here, I'm going to be going into this right here, and then I'll come out over here, in here, out here, in here. But when you sew it, you're gonna sew actually above all of this stuff. You're not gonna sew just those two. You're gonna like push all this down and sew above it so it ends up hiding all of that and looking like that instead of that. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm gonna do this off camera because it's gonna be way too difficult for me to do like the really good, like clean stuff on camera, but this is roughly what it'll look like when it's done. Turtle duck beak is on. I had this like 4 inches from my face the entire time I sewed that on, so that definitely was not gonna happen, that I was gonna get an accurate angle to show you. So there is that. It is not perfect. Like I said, I am still like figuring out how to get that to look really, really seamless, but it is still very cute. So that is what I am happy with. So now the head is 100% done, and we can set this aside until it is time to attach it to the body, which we will get working on now. The first thing we need to do with this body is baste stitch these feet onto it. So the pattern piece comes with placement for whichever duck you're doing. So this would be where you would put the foot if you were doing a classic duck, and here are where you're putting the feet if you're doing the turtle duck. So I'm just gonna lay this like directly on top of my pattern piece, and then we are basting these to this side of the turtle duck. Then I'm going to just take a clip and clip that into place, and do the same thing with this one and just clip that into place. And now for the basting stitch, we want to basically just use a really quick stitch on these that is going to make sure that they stay put. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take them to my machine and machine stitch them, but instead of going the full 1/4 of an inch over that is all of my seam allowance, I'm going to just stitch these as close to the edge as possible. I will still be going over right here with the final stitch, so I wanna make sure that those basting stitches that I'm putting on there end up in the seam allowance so you don't see them in the final duck. Close to that edge as I can manage. And I'm not gonna back stitch or anything, because again, I'm coming over this again. So yeah, you can see that, how close to the edge that is. Right, and then those are ready to go. So now I can pick this up. They're not going to fall and like get lost. They're gonna stay put where I want them to. Now I'm going to take these two that I just sewed. I'm going to lay these pieces right sides together facing each other. And I need to sew this curve right here. So we're gonna go from the tip of the tail over and this whole curve up and sew that. And once you have that edge sewn, we are going to take our scissors and we are going to clip all of the seam right up to that stitch line. And what this does is this will help that seam when we turn it right side out to sit really well. And now obviously you don't want to cut the stitches. You want to get it as close to the stitches as possible without cutting the stitches. So now that that is all clipped, we are ready for the next step, which is going to be adding this gusset to the rest of the body. And I really like these clips because with so many different fabrics, like this yellow, I've found if I put too many holes in it, it will actually start like breaking apart and the fabric doesn't reseal itself very well. So by using these clips, I'm not puncturing it a bunch of times with pins, and therefore I'm not actually like risking it just having a ton of holes in it. When you get to these feet, you want to make sure that they are laying nice and flat against the body so that you can pin them and everything lines up well. And then when you go to sew over that, you'll also want to be mindful that, you know, you have that basting stitch all the way up here. So you're going to want to make sure that your 1/4 inch seam is below that so that you aren't accidentally sewing above that, and then everybody can see your basting stitch when you turn it right side out. That would be bad. We interrupt the sewing to see that there's a cat that apparently thinks she absolutely needs attention this very second. You can't sit there. Like, I got stuff I gotta do. She's just purring away, happy as can be. You can't stay there, Jadis. Body is done. I went ahead and just sewed that other side off camera real quick after I got Jadis off of my lap. And now we can turn this right side out. There are the feet, and now I do have a couple of strings that are sticking out. So I can just take my scissors and very carefully clip those. Grab this handy guy. I'm going to help push the seam out for this tail. Look at that. That is probably one of the best gusset seam ends that I think I have ever done. I'm quite proud of that. And there is the body, right side out. The next step, there is really nothing technical to this at all. I cut 2 little scrap pieces of fabric into a circle, and this is just for the poly pellet pouch that is going into the body of the duck to give it weight so that it'll actually stand up. Otherwise the head is a bit too big and it just kind of falls forward. So I'm going to sew this quick, and nothing fancy. It's a circle. You leave a little bit opening up here at the top. I'm going to take this container I have with some poly pellets and a funnel and just stick the funnel into this opening here. There we go. It doesn't have to be a ton. If it's too much, it'll be too much weight. And then this part you do actually want to be careful of, because you're just going to sew that little opening that you left closed, but you want to make sure there are no poly pellets in that spot that you are sewing, otherwise you're going to break your sewing needle. So I am just going to do that very quickly, and as long as you didn't overfill it, like, you really don't have anything to worry about, but it's always good just to make sure, because if you don't pay attention, it's just annoying having to change your machine needle because you made a simple mistake that could have been avoided. Ta-da! Now we have one little bean bag ready to go into our duck. maybe I'm gonna name this turtle duck beanbag. If you go onto my Etsy shop to buy these, just know this specific turtle duck, its name is Beanbag. And like I said, with the 2 prototypes that I did, I learned that I have to be careful not to put the pallets too far in the front of the body, otherwise the whole thing falls forward. And with this guy, he will definitely fall forward. So I need to make sure I anchor the pellets more toward his actual butt than anything else. And where you place this, once you add stuffing, this should not move. It's important that you put this in the right spot the first time, otherwise you're really not gonna get this to go anywhere. So this is hanging out right there, that's pretty good. So now I can get to stuffing this. And again, you wanna start with a very little bit, because especially now I need to work around this beanbag to get stuffing up into the tip of this tail. Oh, sorry. So we're gonna focus on getting the stuffing all the way up back there first, trying to be mindful that we're not moving this beanbag around very much, because like looking at the body right now, it looks like it's leaning too far back, but as soon as it's fully stuffed and that head gets attached, it's gonna flatten out and look really nice. So I'm gonna spend a little time stuffing this and I will touch back in with you when it is done. Okay, body is stuffed. It is looking good. So now we need to do a gather stitch around the head opening to close that. And this is significantly larger, so I can show you sort of better how the gather stitch is supposed to look as opposed to what I did on the beak. On this, you're gonna pay attention to where you're putting your needle and thread in. You wanna keep it about that 1/4 of an inch mark, so it is, you know, roughly what the seam allowance amount would be. And basically, you're just gonna go in and out all the way around the single piece of fabric. So you don't have, it does not have to be super close by any stretch. So I am just gonna go like that. Okay, so we're basically back to the beginning. So what I'm gonna do, so tuck those in as best as you can. If you can't fully get them in, again, we're sewing this head on top. You're not gonna see any of it, just do your best. So once I get the gathering stitch all the way around on the outside, what I'll do is I'll go across and just do a handful of stitches in larger chunks to help close all of this up. Again, this does not have to be pretty at all. Close up the opening as much as possible so you don't have a lot of seam that you're trying to hide. So once you've got it more or less where you're happy with it, like that's not pretty. I'm not pretending like that's pretty. But once you have that where you are happy with it, now you can stick your head on there, position it how you want, and then you start sewing again, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, all the way around it to attach those two together. And you want to, basically, where these 4 seams meet, you want to attach that as centrally to where that head seam, or the body seam that you just closed up is. Now, what is a turtle duck without its shell? That is the last step. So I have this, you nestle it up into the neck there, and then once again, you ladder stitch it on, and making sure those are some strong stitches, because as you can see, this does not want to stay down. Dan was actually kind enough to record some footage of me stitching this shell onto the turtle duck, so you can see a little closer up in these clips the process of just taking little tiny chunks and just going up and down, up and down, up and down, all the way around this entire shell. And that's what I did with the bill attaching it, that's what I did with the head attaching it. It's just up and down, little stitches all the way around to make sure everything is nice and crisp and taut. And just like that, we have our first turtle duck completed. Here is Beanbag compared to me, size-wise. Very adorable, very adorable. So he will be available on my Etsy shop on Monday the 6th at 9 a.m. I am going to cut out here for a second and do the other 3 ducks quickly and then show you what they all look like finished so you can decide which one is your favorite. Okay, it is a couple days later and I just, not even joking, like a minute ago, finished the last of these ducks and turtle ducks. So let me show them all to you one by one because I am very proud of all of them. I think all of them are very cute. So first off is little beanbag that we made together. Very adorable with those little polka dot feet. Ooh, sorry, beanbag. And then we have the other turtle duck that I made that is darker yellow. Knowing how ducks work, like this could very easily be male, female. Aw, maybe it's Beanbag's special friend. Aw, so cute. For ducks, I decided I wanted to try a mallard-esque little guy. So there he is, sitting all happy and proud. And then to compliment him, we have this gal, who also sits up happy and proud, but she is much more floral and feminine and dainty, if you will. And she is the one that I literally just finished. Here are all 4 of the finished ducks and turtle ducks. I am so happy with how all of them turned out. And like I said earlier in this video, these will all be up for sale at 9 a.m. Monday, February 6th, which is the first Monday of the month. They are the only ones I am making. Not doing anything else. There's one of each, so if you want one, you gotta jump on there and grab it as fast as you can. I will also put a reminder at the very end of next week's video because that will be the day before. Thank you for hanging out with me during this first of hopefully 12 different Etsy related craft videos. I am very proud that I was able to find the time and manage my time well enough to do this. And I am also very excited about next month's Etsy project because it's something I've never made before. And I think they're going to turn out very cute and it will open up a very large world of possibilities for things I can have in the shop, which is very, very exciting. So, like I said, set that reminder for when these go up, and I will see you guys in next week's video.